Governance. My name is Pei Lan, and I serve as a member of CNPL's Leadership Alumni Working Group. You have just heard recordings in progress. This session is going to be recorded for those who will be joining us later. Okay, as I said, I'm actually part of the CNPL's Leadership Alumni Working Group. For information, the Leadership Alumni comprises alumni members from Social Leadership Singapore, ACE Capstone Program, as well as Tote Board Overseas Scholarship Program. I'd like to thank CNPL for inviting me to be the moderator for today's forum. Just a quick overview on the focus for today's discussion. We know that board members and directors have important duties as stewards of organization, ensuring the organization are well governed and well run. Now, amongst the many committees within the board, the role of a nominating committee, NC, is an important one as involved developing policy and practices, as well as recruiting and evaluating board performance. This forum will discuss how the NC can help the board align leadership to the strategic direction of the charity, the importance of ethics and integrity, and the ways NC should function as the architect of good governance. Before we continue further, I'd like to request your attention to some administrative matters. Particularly, I'd like to highlight that you should use, attendees should use the Q&A chat function to comment or pose question. We are actually in a webinar, not a meeting, unfortunately, but pose your question in the Q&A chat function. We will consolidate it, and then we will have the panel to help address some of your concerns and challenges later on. Also, the other thing I'd like to highlight is that the presentation that will be emailed by the good people at CNPL to all participants after the forum, so that will save us some crazy scribbling. Okay, I shall now move on to introduce our speaker and panelists. As all of us know, one slide usually provides just sufficient to tease you to want to get to know them better. So take this as an introduction. The rest is up to you to Google or to LinkedIn. Now, please join me in welcoming Ms. Teresa Goh. Ms. Teresa Goh is actually joining us as in her capacity today as the council member of the Charity Council, as well as the Singapore Institute of Directors. As I said, you can actually read about her achievement, but our one slide does not do justice to our illustrious panelists. Teresa has a whole list of achievements under her belt, and I just want to add on that she was heavily involved in CNPL startup, where she later became the board member as well as the chairperson. You will also want to listen closely later when she's delivering today's talk, because she is in essence distilling a 2-hour lecture down to a 20 minutes jam for all the attendees today. Okay, next up, I would like to introduce Mr. Kevin Lee, who is attending today's session in his capacity as the Vice President of New Hope Community Services. New Hope Community Services is a social agency started in 2003 to provide temporary shelter to the homeless in Singapore. They also run various services and programs that help clients break out of the poverty cycle and to achieve long-term financial resilience and independence. New Hope has a 9-member board, and Mr. Kevin Lee, as I said, is the Vice President of the board. They have also 9 board committees, one of which is the Appointment and Nomination Committee, headed by 1 chair and 1 other member. Next up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chang Wai Leong, who is attending in capacity as the chairperson of the Nomination Committee at AWA Limited. Now, fun fact, Wai Leong is one of the 2 male board members in the 11-member strong board. Okay, Wai Leong heads one of the 8 committees, the Nomination Committee, which comprises 3 other committees, 3 other members. All right, so you'll hear more from Teresa, from Wai Leong and Kevin later on. Now, attention is on to the participants today. As of right now, there is 80 plus of you today. Okay, we will expect more to actually join us in a while, but to start off, just a little bit of warm up, we're going to just launch a quick poll to get a sensing of all of us who are at this virtual forum today. Does your charity have a nominating committee? As you also have seen from Kevin as well as Wai Leong's introduction, you don't necessarily call it a nominating committee. It could be appointment and nomination committee, a nomination committee, but do you have the equivalent of such in your organization, the one that you're working at right now, serving right now? Okay, we like to have, yes, we have about 100 we have about, how many responses is that? 55 responses right now. We have about 80 plus of us. Maybe a few more of you can decide. We only have yes, no, or we don't have a don't know lah. So either you have a yes or you have a no. What would that be? Okay, maybe final. Shall we end the poll, CNPL? If that's the case, yes. So 81% of us today have a nominating committee in place, or equivalent in place, whereas about 20% of us do not have one in place. I will leave this result to our speaker today, Ms. Teresa Goh, and leave her to analyze this and make sense of this. Over to you, Teresa.
Thank you, Phelan, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to be able to share my insights today on how the nominating committee can be a better and better architect of corporate governance. And as Phelan said, I have so much to say, but so little time. So I'm going to get onto it straight away. But I look forward to interacting with you later at the panel session. What I need to do now is to be given permission to click on my slides. So Arthur, can you do that? I'm not able to click, so perhaps somebody can just forward to the next chart. Okay, now I can, right. For a start, to put this into context, I am aware that more than 100 has signed up and about 80 of you are here, so we will have more. I'm also cognizant that all of you are from different backgrounds. Personally, as an executive or a board member of your charity, I'm also aware that there are different profiles of charity, and I suspect that the larger charities are attending today, considering that 20% of you have a nominating committee. And if you're a small and medium-sized charity with a nominating committee, my hat's off to you. You have actually shown yourself to be a good role model. While I talk about the nominating committee, I also mean the 20% of you who do not have a committee, and I encourage you to ensure that the role of the nominating committee is in place. One other point I'd like to make is while I use the term nominating committee, many others use the term nominations committee. It doesn't matter. It's like a US-UK thing, right? It means the same thing, but they use different words for it. So don't be too bothered by that. They are used interchangeably. So the NC, like any other board committee, serves the function to enable that ultimately the outcome is an effective board. Yeah, so committees do not exist for no reason. They exist to achieve an outcome of an effective board. And what is an effective board? Essentially, it's two things. It's a board that creates value for all stakeholders. The key word here is all stakeholders. Yeah, it's not just your beneficiary. Yes, all the programs must be beneficiary-centric, but the board must create value for all stakeholders, whether they are volunteers, employees, donors, maybe even investors. And the other thing that the board has to do is to ensure that the charity conforms to the rules of the jurisdiction. So for example, if you're a CLG, you will have to pay attention to the Companies Act as well as the Charities Act. If you are a society, then you must be complying to the ROS Act as well as the Charities Act and the IPC Act as well, if you are an IPC. The same goes for if you're a trust or a foundation. You would have to watch out for some of the rulings under the Ministry of Law and even MAS. If you look at the diagram, an effective board must learn how to balance the conformance and the performance. And that's where the experience of the board comes in, because it is often not an easy balance to strike. Many charities I know are paying a lot more attention to the conforming part, especially if you're a large charity. And for the small charities, you have no resource to help you to conform, and you're just running after performance because you are in the build-up stage, which is why the balance would be that the skill of the board as a whole. Now, the importance of the NC in ensuring board effectiveness, there are a lot of things that the NC does. And I've summarized it into 5 areas: board composition, structure, independence, dynamics, evaluation, and succession planning. And you notice that I've added a plus sign behind. In my personal experience, the words alone are not enough to describe what an NC does. Board composition can sound very simple, but it is very complicated. And that's why I use the symbol of a plus behind, so that you understand how complex it can be, and also to choose the context that you want to be using some of the insights that I'll be sharing with you. I've taken my references from the Singapore Code of Corporate Governance, the Code of Governance for Charities and IPCs, and the Board Appointment Guide for Charities. I cross-referenced these 3 documents, and I realized that these 3 areas appear consistently in all 3. And I am totally aware that charities, being very resource tight, do compromise some compliance or performance in favor of having a better workload and resource management. So I'm going to lay out the gold standard, and you are going to be sharing at the panel session what works for you and what doesn't. But my advice for all charity is, no matter how big or small you are, no matter which sector you are in, always strive for the gold standard, because all your stakeholders are watching. Yeah, and it is a very competitive sector in the area of funds. Yeah, so the more gold standard you are, the more your donors is going to be releasing, opening up their pockets and their bank accounts. Ultimately, the 5 areas that I'm talking about, they dovetail into something called the board renewal and continuity. I've met many board members who tell me why renew is so difficult to renew. And they also tell me that their founders are the best people to run the charity. Well, here are a few reasons why, and it's not going to be like rocket science to you. I'm sure you've heard of this before. New board members bring fresh perspective. Traditional board members are less independent and more subjective. And it all ends up with a question mark on the decision that they make for the charities. Now, besides renewal, the other end of the other side of the coin would be continuity. You want to balance renewal with continuity, which is why at every point of the renewal, we shouldn't be looking at more than 30%, not more than 1/3 of your board to be renewed at any point in time. And again, renewal and continuity has to be taken in the context of the life cycle of the charity, right? So if you are at the beginning stage and you need all your board members to be rolling up their sleeves and doing the heavy lifting, by all means, you should be recruiting those kind of directors. If you're at the program development and infrastructure stage, then you want to have directors with that kind of experience. If you're in the impact expansion, then you are moving towards a governing board, meaning you are only going to be focusing on the strategic matters and leaving the operational matters to the management team. So it's important when you're renewing your board to also reflect on where you are in the life cycle of your charity. So for example, when I was a chair of SATA, we were moving away from the treatment of tuberculosis to the treatment of chronic diseases in the community. And that took the board to make tough decisions to replace the board members who are only familiar with the whole lingo of tuberculosis. Yeah, so we arrived at a decision where we do need to renew at least 1/3 of the board. And that has been ongoing year on year. And I would say that by the time I left, 2/3 of the board would have been new members. And the reason why I talked about renewal is when I refer to the CNPL Board Leadership Survey. For those of you who have been around for a while, you might remember that CNPL had a leadership survey in 2016, and they did another leadership survey. Oh, sorry, the charts just went a bit haywire. They did another survey in 2020, and they compared the difference. So if you look at the 2016 column versus the 2020 column, you would notice that all the charities have advanced in most of the areas of compliance, except for board renewal, right? So from an 8% to a 34% in board renewal is quite significant, but it's very low compared to the rest of the percentage. Yeah, you may be asking 24% disclosure on annual reports. To me, this is a technical change. And I know that the Charity Council is coming out with templates for you all to effect that technical change quite quickly. For board renewal, it's more than a technical change. Yeah, no matter, unless we come up with some sort of a mandate, board renewal requires a shift in mindsets. Yeah, a shift in paradigms, as well as questioning some of the fears and anxieties associated with why charities do not renew their boards to the level of frequency that they should be. And that's why I chose to speak about this topic. Now let's look at the first plus, board composition plus. The principle behind ensuring a good board composition would be to make sure that there's enough independence on the board and there is a diversity of thought among the board members. There has been a lot of focus on gender diversity. That is the most visible part of diversity. But the spectrum of diversity is larger than the gender. It goes into skills, experiences, the way we think about things. Yeah, so in the board composition exercise, it is important to think about how to ensure that there is a true spectrum of diversity on the board. You want to make sure that there is a transparent nominating process which means all the board members are involved. If you are chairing an NC or a member of the NC, you want to ensure that there is conversations all around and all your board members are involved. You also want to ensure there's due diligence, background checks, conflict of interest checks. And you want to ensure also that in the process of nominating, you are also thinking into the future of renominating, reappointment, and also cessation of board members. I find that it's helpful to use a qualification and diversity matrix, and you could find that in the board appointment guide, page 8 and 9. It's very helpful for you to have a bird's eye view of what the whole board looks like. You want to check out on the commitment of your board members. The rule of thumb is a board member shouldn't be sitting in more than 4 or 5 boards. If they're sitting in 4 or 5 boards already, it is very unlikely, still possible, but very unlikely that they are able to spend adequate amount of time with your charity. Just make sure that in the greater scheme of things, the majority of members are non-executive and independent. And not just for objective decision-making, but also for public opinion optics. It's important that because you are spending public money, the School of Public Opinion also views your board to be independent. Now, board member onboarding is very, very important. And I know that more and more charities are curious to do this. I encourage you to do that. At SATA, I had 6 months of onboarding for every new board member that comes along, and they know what is the plan. They know that they're going to be spending time with management, that they'll be going out to visit partners, and that they will have to turn up for community events. Yeah, and because you have a plan, they are able to be to commit their time on their calendar as well. Last but not least, director development is absolutely important. Many directors walk into the sector with a passion and a good heart. That's not enough. Yeah, in a more and more regulated sector, it is important to understand your duties, your liabilities, as well as your obligations. And there are many places you can go to look for development. Yeah, SID, SGood, CNPL, and SSI. So as an example, the SGood program for SID has 8 programs. We've got several hundred directors go through this program, and I must say there is a pretty good network of directors who are cross-learning from each other. So if you have not attended this, I encourage you to sign up. I believe we're already in module 3 of the program. It's not too late to sign up. You can always make up for it next year. Sorry, I can't seem to be clicking. Okay, I'm using my keyboard instead. Yeah, the next area would be about board structure. Yeah, usually we talk about the size of boards. The average size of charity boards is about 11. Yeah, and the advice in the board appointment guide is that if you have more than 10 board members, it is best to form a nominating committee, right? And as far as term limits is concerned, it's very clear. The charity unit, the guidance is a maximum of 10 years for large charities. And of course, there are ways you can go around it. You can take a hiatus and come back, but do look at the fine print in the Code of Governance. Under board structure, it's important to define who is executive and who's non-executive. Many CEOs of charities do not take a board seat. They attend board meetings, yes, but they are not a member of the board. So I would advise that an ex-officio role be created for the CEO. In SATA, I did that for the CEO and even the CFO and the COO, because I think these are significant leadership roles, and they should be involved in the decision-making with regards to strategy as much as possible. The only thing that they didn't have privilege was to vote. Yeah, but it's important to have an ex-officio position. You may want to think about whether a board exco is a good thing. Personally, I do not subscribe to an exco because I think it goes against the principles of transparency. But if you have a very large board, say 20-25 members, then it may be efficient to have an exco, just to make sure that communications are very, very transparent to every board member. Instead of committees, you may also want to consider having task force. For example, if you want to ramp up something or scale up an area in your charity, a task force that serves for 1 or 2 years is enough. Yeah, you do not need a committee that tends to remain for the longer term. Officer appointments would be very good for succession planning in the area of vice presidents, 1 or 2 vice presidents. Who is the treasurer? The treasurer has a term limit of 4 years, and as well as the chairs of the committees. These are all very good people that can line up for succession to occupy the key positions. It's important to determine the number and types of committees. I've seen charities with 1 committee, mainly the audit committee. I've also seen charities with 8 or 9 committees. So there's a huge range. What's more important is the board committees must align with the main board meeting, right? So it's always good to have a cadence, a calendar right at the beginning of your financial year, outlining the main board meetings and all the committee meetings in between. Many times when I'm invited into the charities to help them think through their board governance, the issue of board committees and the main board meeting alignment comes up. Under structure, you also want to pay attention to the chair and CEO relationship in the area of separation of duties. Yeah, some chairs tend to want to get into the operational area and interfere with the work of the CEO, and that's definitely a no-no, right? As far as the NC is concerned, the guideline will be to have 3 directors. You can have at least 3 directors to meet at least twice a year. You must have a TOR. Again, the board appointment guide has a TOR sample, and the chair must be independent. So if you have a question on whether the board chair should be a chair of an NC, no would be my advice, because that would not make the NC chair independent. And yeah, if you have more than 3 members, you just want to make sure that the majority of them are independent members. We go to board independence. Yeah, I spoke about the chairman independence. This is the chairman of the board. And why do I say that? I have come across charities whereby the chairman and the directors themselves are providing services to the charity and being paid for it. Yeah, so that raises question mark, yeah, right? So it is always good to have a chairman who's independent, and the NC chair must always be independent. There must be a process to have annual declaration of independence, and I know many charities already practice that, you know, with that conflict of interest declaration. Now, in the event, for example, the example that I gave earlier, where the directors are being paid to provide services to the charity, and if there are very, very critical reasons for why that should continue, make sure it's disclosed. Yeah, it's disclosed to the board. Even better, disclose it to the in the annual reports. Yeah, in the commercial sector, directors who make money from their own organizations are limited to a maximum amount of 50,000. Yeah, so you may want to state a ceiling as well to how much the director can make. Board and diversity disclosure is absolutely important in the annual reports. When the donors are thinking of who to donate to among a few charities, guess where they go to first? They go and see your annual report. The more disclosure you have will give them more confidence and trust in investing in you. If you want to get it right at the beginning, you want to make sure that you do an independent director search and assessment. Yeah. Go to CNPL board search, go to SID board appointment services, get a third party to surface the board members for you. Yes, it will be more challenging to work with people you do not know well, but that's how boards mature. And I would encourage all NC chairs to encourage their board members to think of it this way. Yeah, an uncomfortable board is a board that gives you opportunity for growth. Yeah, when you get too comfortable, you know, all the board members will plateau in the way you think. So all in all, board independence revolves around principles of transparency, accountability, and disclosure. Now we move on to board dynamics. This is where, and this is a new science, it's surfacing in the boardroom over the last 5 years, because board members are also realizing that it's human beings that exist in the boardroom. And human beings comes with different motivation, different personalities, and different competencies. Yeah, and the collective sum of it will make board dynamics pleasant or unpleasant or anything in between. Yeah, so it's important for boards to pay attention to director profiles, interpersonal dynamics, collective dynamics, as well as how the board behaves in the boardroom, and also how the board behaves to external parties. Are the boards being seen to be in unison, or are they individual silo board members? The role of the chair is very, very significant in ensuring a healthy board dynamics. You will need someone who can facilitate meetings, who can call out dysfunctional behaviors, who can also give good feedback on good behaviors. Board and management relationship, absolutely important area. The chair and CEO relationship, I mentioned earlier on the structure, it's a division between the strategic and the operational matters. Here would be personality blending, motivational blending. That's important as well. Yeah. Now the gold standards in NRC would be whether they are able to build a board that revolves around a culture of trust, collective wisdom, constructive discontent. This is where not all board members are expected to agree with each other. And that's why there is an opportunity for innovative thinking, for constructive communications, and that leads to a more matured board from one term to another. And of course, a code of conduct, not just a piece of paper or a checklist exercise, but real behaviors that the boards commit to manifest with or without the management team. Now, the dynamics associated with decision making is very important. For example, if the chair is very dominant, you might end up with a board that thinks, that practices groupthink, in order not to offend the chair. It is imperative for the NRC chair and the NRC members to look out for things like this and to call it out in the best way possible. I spoke about dysfunctional behaviors, how to handle difficult board members, or even if the chair is a problem himself or herself, what does the NRC do? It's really an important topic. And I talked about continuing feedback and improvement. Without conversations, without engagement, the board will not grow in unison. Now, board evaluation and succession. I do not know how many charities are actually practicing that, but this is becoming more and more important in the discussions with the Charity Council as well. What the NRC chair and members can do would be to start to think about what kind of evaluation would be helpful. Yeah, I have practiced board collective evaluation, self-evaluation, self-directed self-evaluation, as well as peer evaluation and evaluation of the chairs. And I've come out of that 3 to 4 years as chair, learning much more about myself. And I see that my board members have also learned much more about each other. And they were even able to speak openly about some of their preconceptions and their assumptions about each other that surface in the board evaluation. Yeah, so board evaluation isn't just about performance of the board. That's absolutely important, but it's also for developmental purpose. Yeah, so that we board members can find out about each other's strengths and weaknesses and learn how to be constructive with each other. Yeah, the objective of the board evaluation is very important. Are you using it to cast out board members, or are you really using it for developmental purpose? That has to be communicated sincerely and transparently. Yeah, the method of it, a survey or inviting a third party to come in and help you, like CNPR has a pulse check that helps in this area as well. These are all effective methods. How often do you want to do it? I did it every year. I know some charities that do it twice, once in 2 years or once in 3 years. It depends. Yeah, you know the answer yourself. It's very important that the findings are shared with the board member, that the board gets together to create an action plan, and there is follow through and checkpoint conversations on the action plans. If you are starting on board evaluation, this would be good areas to look at. Yeah, governance areas, structure, strategy and performance, and board functions. And I will assure you, if you start with your board evaluation, at the end of your first evaluation, you will be able to assess if your board is forward-looking, whether there's enough focus on diversity and whether there's enough focus on sustainability. Yeah, and post-COVID, I think these are the 2 keywords that is going to result in stronger boards. For CEO evaluation, so board evaluation isn't just about the board, it's about the CEO evaluation as well. So take care to ensure that you are setting the right metrics for your CEO to enable the organization health to continue and also to provide just rewards and succession planning. Yeah, a bit more about the succession for boards and CEO. Try to plan 3 to 5 years ahead. So if you're not doing it now, yes, plan for next year. Yeah, but for those of you who are more future forward, really think about 5 years. What's the sector going to look like with all these complicated geopolitics that's happening? And collective impact being the key word for almost every sector. In 5 years' time, what is the charity sector going to look like? What is your charity going to look like? And who do you think you should be bringing about? Digitalization, for example, is going to be the mainstay in a couple of years' time. There's so much focus going into it. So it's important to align it to your future mission. And always consider internal committee members. There is a reason why they are serving. It's because they are attracted to your cause, right? So for them to advance to the board makes a lot of sense. And always make it a point to review the CEO's plan for succession of senior management as well. With that, I'd like to end my presentation. I hope I've not exceeded my 20 minutes, but this is my last chart. I would need the nominating role to come out of the shadows, right? Because the future of the nominating role isn't just about nominating, it's about governance. And in SATA, when I joined SATA, I joined the governance and nominating committee. It's one committee with governance and nominating under one roof. And to me, that's future forward. Thank you. And I would like to hand you back to Pei Lan for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Teresa. Wow. Okay, I really appreciate sitting here and listening to you, distilling, giving us the highlight from your usual 2 hours lecture into a 20-minute session for all attendees. Currently, we have 95 participants. A few more came in after you started. So for those who just joined us midway, just want to let you know that this is actually a lecture that Teresa actually goes deeper into when she's actually doing it at SID. So she has very kindly tried to distill the essence for us today. I still strongly encourage all of us who really wants to do this further to go through the S-Good program that Teresa talked about. Okay. Well, we started with 0 question at Q&A, and then as Teresa go along, and then questions start coming in. So let's go right in. And for those who took the poll earlier on, we do know that 80% of us actually have an NC in place. 20% of us actually do not have an NC in place, which is why I just want to take on this question first. Okay, this question comes from this. It says, we are a small charity and we don't have an NC. Our chair takes the role of bringing in new members. What are the potential downsides? So we want to, talk to this group of people first, and perhaps I can invite Wai Leong to give your take on this.
Thanks, Pei Lan. I have to say, I missed the first part of your question. Do you mind if you just repeat the question again?
Okay. The question is, we are a small charity and we don't have a nominating committee.
Right.
Our chair takes the role, our board chair, I would assume, takes the role of bringing in new members. So this is not an independent NC who does it. The board chair takes it upon himself to bring in new members. What are the potential downsides from such a practice?
Okay. Yeah, my view is that in a way, NC is really a tool, if you will, of the board, right? The NC doesn't exist in a way separate from the board. So small boards don't necessarily need an NC. So bigger boards have the resources and they appoint an NC to do the things that ultimately is still the board's responsibilities, right? So the NC acts on behalf of the board. In the case of a small entity that does not have an NC, I guess the downside is that the downside has to do with the fact that the board is small. And therefore, you may not have the degree of independence that Teresa spoke about. So number one, lack of resource, because a big board has a separately staffed NC to go do separate things, right? If you don't have an NC, presumably you lack the board members. So number one is, fewer resources. Number two, if the chair himself is doing the work of the NC in terms of inviting new members, that's probably, you know, not necessarily a bad thing. But if the board wants to then tackle issues like board evaluation, succession planning, and so on, then you can see why the lack of independence may come into play, because a particular chairperson that is, let's say, you know, reluctant to have an objective evaluation of the board, or may end up overstaying her or his welcome. That could be an issue that will not be easily raised.
Okay, Kevin, do you have anything to add on to that question?
I agree to what Wai Long shared earlier. I think the intention is really about independence, because when it is a small charity, end of the day, it's still the board, which I think alluded to what Teresa shared from the beginning, right? It starts with the stewardship, right? So if we understand stewardship, then we need to make sure that the 5 areas that I think Teresa covered it needs to be grounded in some sense. So if there is no NC, then the elements of that performing that role has to surface within the board. Now, of course, what I think, let's say for New Hope's journey, right? So what we did was also that we share the load. We have all the board members to own the committees. That's why you have 9 board members and also 9 committees. The whole idea is to make sure that the committee chairs, subcommittee chairs will raise up their prospective board subcommittee members or board members. NC will provide an independence review. And again, it's still back to the board to accept and endorse those proposed board members or subcommittee members. So end of the day, it's still back to the board.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So so some of the questions, by the way, when you don't give your name, it's actually anonymous. So to this participant who actually asked the question that you're a small charity, you don't have an NC, what are the potential downsides? I suppose you're actually asking this question because you want to be able to talk to your chairman, right, about starting one. I think you actually hear from panelists just now, also heard from Teresa, that this is actually a good practice. It's not difficult. Maybe take the deck from Teresa and then sit down with the chair and actually go through with it. Okay. We'll move on to the next questions, and this is actually, it came about when Teresa was talking about board renewal. For board renewal, can the nomination board recommend the removal of a board member even though the member's term is not yet up? Teresa, perhaps you can just, do you want to clarify on this question? Do you think?
Yeah, I think this touches on the cessation of a board member, and there are many ways a board can, stop serving. Either they've reached they retire at the end of the term, or they've reached the term limit, or they are not performing, and the board wants this board member to exit. So absolutely that can be done, but it has to be done in a manner that's very, very sensitive, right? Which is why if you have a board evaluation in place, that too will give you reasons to justify for that move. In my experience as chair, I have asked board members to leave, and to this day we remain on good terms. Yeah, because I was able to give very specific incidents and very specific feedback, plus looking at the board evaluation feedback to justify why that person should leave. In fact, when you are factual and evidence-based, it is very likely the board member himself or herself will say, perhaps it is time for me to step down. And you've done your job professionally, and that board member has gone to another charity and still performed very well. Yeah, so sometimes it's a matter of fit. Yeah, so yes, absolutely, to answer the question directly, a board can ask a board member to leave. But what I normally does is I will wait for this board member to serve out their term. Yeah, it's in a way giving respect for the commitment of that board member. And during that time, just pay attention, work with the NC chair and pay attention that we are engaging that board member regularly, so that board member doesn't still continue to bang his hands on the table, So, just manage it respectfully and professionally. Yeah, and earlier on, there was a question about a small charity and whether the chair can be an NC. Well, there's nothing stopping you. The chair can be anybody he wants to be, right? So the question is whether the intent of the chair is clear and made clear and transparent. All of us are human beings. We have blind spots. We have preferences. We sometimes hire people like ourselves. We hire people we like. So even a chair would have that kind of tendencies. Yeah, so it's important that if the chair is holding the NC role, I would prefer the chair delegate it to somebody else because of optics. Yeah, but if the chair absolutely has to be the one, then make sure that there are at least 2 other members that are reviewing the CVs and making reference checks, and there must be a transparent report produced for that small charity board to say, we've done our reference check and this is an independent board member, and to disclose any conflicts of interest. Yeah, chairmen usually have a lot of friends. Yeah, so that's something we do have to watch out for.
Thanks, Teresa, for providing further clarification to the earlier question about, if you're a small charity, you don't have an NC, can the chair actually steps in? And also for providing the answer to the question of when you, for a board member, can the NC actually recommend a removal? And Teresa actually given some suggestion on how, yes, we can do it and how to do it. And along this line, I want to lead on very quickly to the next question. We have a number of questions. This lead on is very, is actually relevant to the earlier question about this removal, because what they want therefore to know is, does therefore a good NC member, does it help to actually have HR background? If you think about it, this is, you need to recruit people, you need to get them to go. Does having some experience with HR actually helps? So I'm going to ask Kevin, what do you think about that?
I think for NC, you need to be more well-rounded, not just about HR, right? So like in the New Hope's case, we had both the legal and the finance board members, right, to lean in, partly because we also want to make sure that at least if our board subcommittee chairs put up the person, we have done the character, we have done the commitment, we have done their alignment check, right? So of course, with our NC role is to really provide independence and make sure that there's a good grounds to support those board members or board subcommittee members that comes through the NC's validation process. So really depend. I won't say that it's a must, but it's good to have.
Wai Leong?
Yeah, agree. I don't think it is necessary, but it's good to have.
Okay. So I'm just kind of curious. So I mean, for Wai Leong, your 3 other members, what is their background like? I mean, in AY itself.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one other person who is actually from the accounting audit background, and then it so happens that the 3rd person is a former CFO. In fact, he's a former finance leader with experience in listed companies. So he also brings along knowledge of governance for listed companies. And then, of course, we actually have the chair as well as a member of the NC at AWA. So we have these 4 members.
Okay.
Can I add my view on that?
Yes, please, Teresa.
Okay, there is a differentiation between the NC chair and the NC members, right? So the NC chair is a board member, and all board members are expected to be strategic in the thinking, regardless of what functional expertise they come from. So that strategic level of thinking is very important, and that kind of has a bird's eye view on all the functional areas. encompassing HR, finance, operations, sales, business development, and profit making, whatever. Now, as far as the MC members are concerned, it's good to have a diversity. But I would say absolutely you need at least one of them to have strategic HR experience. And when we talk about strategic HR, we're not talking about payroll or employee grievance. We are really talking about leadership and talent management. That whole process of sourcing talents, selection, due diligence, onboarding, those kind of skills are important, and it falls under the privy of strategic HR. There isn't a position like this for smaller companies. For the larger companies, they do have that. So those skills are important, at least one person as a member of the NRC committee. But overall, the NRC committee should be diverse as well, with majority being independent.
Thank you. Because then there was also answer one of the questions that comes in very simply as that what constitute best candidate for position in the NC. So I guess that you have it. You have that various role to play. Diversity is good, and if you can, of course, have somebody who is able to provide that strategic HR perspective on things. Okay. So moving on. Let's see. Okay. So one of your attendee has this particular perception. He says that nominating committee members need to be experienced, cannot be new members of the charity. That is, they should already be serving in the charity for some time. Should this be a good guideline for my MPO to follow? I maybe Teresa, you might want to take on this. If I may read the question again, it says nominating committee members need to be experienced and cannot be new members of the charity. They should already be serving in the charity for some time. Should this be a good guideline for my MPO to follow?
That's the ideal position, right? If you've planned your succession well ahead of time, you would have committee members for your charity who have the nominating experience. But in the absence of that, you may want to be open to nominating members from other charities. And in the absence of that, someone with nominating experience, even from outside the sector. Because these are what I call transferable skills. It really doesn't matter. Talent management is talent management across all sectors. Strategic HR is also the same across all sectors. So if you had done your succession properly, then yes, you would be able to organically appoint your NC members. But in the absence of that, you have to start somewhere.
Pei Lan, if I'm not wrong, I think the question is about whether or not the NC members should come from within the same entity, right? As opposed to, brought in new from another charity or another entity, right? So if I may just also touch on that point. AWA, for example, uses committees as a way to bring in new members into the extended board, if you will. And it is at each of these committees that, in a way, we allow the new committee members to learn about AWA and, demonstrate if indeed this is a cause that they resonate with, and they continue to be interested to contribute and to be involved. And then over time, those people, because we're all volunteers, right? Those people with the time and the interest, they may get then nominated to chair a committee, following which they then sit on the main board. So I just wanted to say that some committees do require new people to join to bring fresh blood, so to speak. Our experience is that the NC at AWA did bring in new members from the outside straight into the NC, particularly if they have the right experience. But indeed, we found out that unlike, say, other committees like fundraising and all that, where you may not need to know a lot about AWA, let's say, in order to be an effective member of the fundraising committee, for the NC, it is useful, right? If you, let's say, have already sat on the board of AWA and then you step down and you join the NC, because you bring history, you bring credibility. So I just want to share that, right? That committees is one way for you to bring in new members to be evaluated to become board members, but certain committees might require more history than others. Teresa, do you agree with that?
I think we're both saying the same.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I want to move on to this. There's actually a number of questions that actually focus or more or less actually aligned to the question about chairmanship, chairman of the board. I will read out from one. In our charity, the board chair and past immediate board chair were elected as the NC chairman. Teresa has shared that it is advised or rather it is advisable for chairman's independence, I think in the case of the NC committee. So the setup and the culture in this charity has been like this. How do we raise it to the board chair? Perhaps I can get Teresa to have a go at this first, and then maybe Kevin can add on from New Hope Community Services. Do you have such instances? Thanks. Teresa, you're muted.
So there seem to be many players in this question. So there is a chair.
Board chair, past
Board chair.
immediate board chair. Yeah.
Past immediate, so the last two chair, right?
Elected as the NC chair. So there's
so the previous chair came in as an NC chair.
I would assume that this is They are also along the line of how I guess the chairman of the board is playing a very important role or direct role in as the NC. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the test of independence will have to be asked. How independent is the chair and how independent is the NC chair, right? If there is sufficient evidence to prove that they are both behaving objectively, then there's nothing wrong. It is in line with Wai Leong's comment earlier. You can get an ex-board member come in to serve as the chairman of the committee. So the test of independence would be very dependent on the context. But if they are both bringing in their friends, then as a board, and if you have not been sleeping on the job, then you would already catch such things immediately. Then I would suggest that at least 1/3 of the board member should come together and speak up, bring it up in private to the chair, yeah, and failing which, then it can be surfaced to the NC members with or without the NC chair, and failing which, surface to the board meeting itself. Yeah, ultimately, the board is the final decision maker.
Kevin, do you have anything to add on to that?
Sure. I mean, I think New Hope is going through the late teens years of its formation, right? So for parents who have teenagers in the late teens, you know where I'm coming from. So of course, 3 years back, we had some board members had a different view, and 2 or 3 of them actually did the step down, and then we had to relook at the whole board formation, right? The important thing is, I think the crux of it is that to ascribe to what the Teresa shared about independence, right? The important thing is also to see that the board is also integrated in the sense that they are behind the whole mission, behind the whole vision of things, and also the management. Meaning to say that we should be, I mean, part of that thing that Teresa also shared in the opening address, right? It's really about trust and respect. What that means is that I think the board, while keeping the independence, the integration must happen in such a way that the trust and respect must happen in such a way that those conversations must happen if there's an issue. And we have also come to the point where even though we have diverse views, right, we have come to agree on the collective that we move together. It's okay to have diverse views. In fact, it should be welcome. We don't want a group thing, right? Everybody just endorse. Neither do we want a situation that is a chairman's club or chairwoman's club, because that's also very dangerous because of the independence discussion, right? because it can appear independent, but functionally not so. So I think to find a balance is that everybody has a part to play. Clearly, the chair is important, but I think we need to keep the right balance to make sure that independence is not just seen right, but actually is acting out right as well.
So as I mentioned, there's a lot of similar questions about chairman of the board having a lot of influence on the NC committee. You have actually heard from Teresa, you heard from Kevin. Maybe I should also hear from Wai Leong, because Wai Leong has a couple of ex officio members. So some of the question was asking, like, when ex-board members or chairmen, when they step down, should they create their ex officio seat for them in the NC? What's your take on that?
My view is not to. I think that when chairs step down, they should step away. I guess past chairs, if they want to join committees to contribute, not as a board member, I think they're welcome to. The NC is slightly more sensitive, right, than say the program committee or fundraising committee. So I would sort of take the same line as Teresa, that ideally, if you're the past chair and you step down, you step away, you give the new chair room to make the changes that are usually necessary, right, after the sort of a lengthy enough period that the past person has chaired. But my view is that former board members who have served 9 years or served 1 or 2 terms, if sometimes board members step down because they either go back to full-time work or they cannot spend as much time as they think they should. So they don't want to be a full member of the board, but they may still be able to contribute at the committee level. So my view is that if the person is able to contribute and you're not displacing a new member, right? Because part of the NC's job is to make sure that committees are filled with new members, right? New committee members who are supposed to become the source of future board members, right? Because there you can evaluate them, you can see how they interact with other committee members. So I hope that answers the question. Ideally, people who have spent the time should really step away and leave the new board members to make new changes.
Yes, and this is what I personally practice. When I sat down as chair of SATA, I completely stepped out. I did not even join any of the committee. Yeah, and the board invited me back to be a board advisor, and to that I agree. Yeah, because there's clear separation of duties.
So always good to have, I guess in a nutshell, it's always good to have experience, good help nearby, but create that segregation, right? So like in the case of Teresa, she went back as a board advisor. So very clearly what her duties and
correct. And the board advisor does not attend board meetings.
Yes. Yeah. So very clear delineation of duties and all.
Yes.
With the time that we have left, I really want to go through them very general one. Coming back again to some of the concerns of the small charities. One of them says that, look, I am less than 2 years old. I really want to start an NC. How do I go about looking for resources to start one? Anyone want to help out?
I think I'm to the question
of the 3 of us, so I should start.
We are new. Okay, at what age should a charity have an NC? They are attending here, they're less than 2 years old. And there's also others who are like them, for in a very infant young age, but they are here, they listen to the talk, they think that this is a good thing to have. I want to have an NC, but how do I go about starting one? Help.
Yeah.
I replied to that question to ask him to go to CNPL. They have a board batch program. and there would be people who are interested to be in the NC. But I want to share my experience with CNPL. When I started CNPL, we only had 3 staff, and I formed a board of 10 members and appointed one of them to be an NC chair. Yeah, right. So it doesn't matter the age of the charity. It's the signal that you send out, yeah, that you're future forward. And the donors who came in, they were really surprised that we have 3 staff and we had an audit committee and an NC committee. Yeah, but then it gave them confidence. Yeah.
So I want, there are a lot, again, some of us here today listening to this, very inspired to want to do it and find it very daunting to do it. But if we have stayed throughout, just know that there are resources. If you want to look for help, Teresa has mentioned, go to CNPL. They have a lot of programs and services in place to help you. Because there's also another question that says, I find challenges in finding board members. How do I even entice them to consider me, small little new one that just came onto the market, right? Again, no worries. Everybody will take care of you. Okay, so have faith. All right. The other one, therefore, again, for broad learning, right, is how do you groom members for NC within, let's say I already have my board directors, right? I have a pool of them. I think we kind of actually talk about it, but again, how do we conscientiously groom them? If they are not already having the existing strategic HR skills that Teresa, Wai Leong, and Kevin has talked about, how do you then make the effort to groom them?
A very quick answer from me before I leave the 2 gentlemen. Send them to the SID S-Good program module 7. That's about the NC committee, and they will attend half day of learning on that.
Thank you. Wai Leong, Kevin?
I endorse.
That's a good one.
No, but also to add to it, right, is the journey is also to, like New Hope's case, to Teresa's credit, right, the board appointment guide was really helpful. It's a good resource to think through because it's a journey, right? It's about, I think Teresa used a very important future forward looking, because if we don't do that, then we're always stuck with the current issues, because every charities and NPO, right, always have short-term issues, in your face issue that you need to fix. But at the board level, right, the strategic mindset is really important to be future forward looking and really making sure that this is a journey, not a pit stop by itself.
Yeah. The other thing to add is that the current chair of the NC should take that task, right, as one of his or her KPIs. The current chair of any committee should always think about succession planning, and it's no different for the NC. So the nominating committee should always be thinking about, the chair should be stepping down at some point. Some members might have indicated that they want to step down again at some point. So the NC chair should always be thinking about who else outside in the greater world, the marketplace, if you will, who knows what your charity is doing and is interested, and if he or she has the right, we talked about strategic HR, organizational development, talent sourcing, and all that. If someone like that is interested, then it's the NC chair's job to recruit that person into the NC, to position that person to learn about the charity and the work, and then ultimately potentially to take over, or you ideally you get 2 of them, plus the NC chair and someone who was a former board member, for example, and then out of the 2 new members, hopefully one of them can be a successor.
Thank you, panelists. This question, I guess it comes about for existing charities that already have an NC in place. They are very keen to know what are the mistakes to avoid. So for some of us who already have nominating committee in place, right? And we might be thinking, hey, we are actually doing right. And then we hear some things that Teresa mentioned just now, and then all start sweating, right? Maybe we are not doing it so right after all. So mistakes, failures that we have actually done in the past are always good things to learn from. So could I just ask the panelists to think about, if you have to talk about some of the common things that you see people making, and those are to you glaring mistake to avoid for an NC, what are those? Maybe I can invite again Teresa to start off with, and then Wai Leong and Kevin to finish off on that.
Well, I've seen NCs that are very, very inactive. Yeah, so they are constituted by people who have no idea about appointments and succession and assessment or evaluation. So they actually don't do much, and they probably meet once a year. Yeah, and a lot of the things that I mentioned is actually not done. Yeah, so I would say that would be a major mistake. As long as the right members are in place, I believe most will want to do the right thing. So if the NC is not properly constituted, there will be a limit to what they can do, just like any other committees.
Yeah.
Wai Leong?
Okay. Well, I mean, in a way, there is mistake by omission and there's mistake by commission, right? So indeed, if the chair is not strong and not demanding that the NC does its job well, then indeed the NC could meet less than is required, right? Because they're supposed to meet 3 times a year at the very least. So meeting once, it's not good and should be reported in the annual report, and you wouldn't want to do that. Some of the So number one, the NC is not aware of what it is supposed to do. That's one. Number two, I think sometimes if you don't have an NC that is being pushed or is being led and would do things step by step, right? So for example, an NC that has been doing well, let's say, would understand what is the vision and strategy of the entity, and therefore would have an understanding, right, of previous self-evaluation, what are the skills that are missing. The NC should ask each committee chair to talk about their own respective succession planning. What type of new members would they like to join their committees, right, as part of succession planning? So one of the mistakes that can happen is that if 1 or 2 board members are very active in recommending, new members to join the extended board, and if the NC doesn't have the time and doesn't have other sources of new members, then you can accidentally commit the mistake of just having people come in that are all, let's say, friends of one board member, right? Which doesn't help with diversity or independence, because ideally the NC should be ahead of the game, knowing what skills are needed in the near and far future, and sourcing from a broad variety of potential candidates.
Thanks, Wai Leong. So from Teresa, we talk about making sure that you have clear TOR. Sorry, that's from Wai Leong. If you know that you have a clear TOR, and then the NC should really be moving their butt to working on those TOR. If you are inactive, nothing's going to get done. Kevin, what is one mistake that the NC really should watch out for and not commit it?
I will say it in general first before we share about New Hope's journey, right? To take it to the extreme, right, about not doing anything, having a TOR. We also don't want an NC that's very guarded, and means to say they only want certain people to come in. It can happen that way. I've seen charities very guarded, right, who they want to bring in. So I think that is also to avoid as well. I think for New Hope's case, because we're in the late teen stage, right? So in the last 2 years, the COVID, we were ramping up the committees, we were ramping up the subcommittee members as well. So in fact, my NC had a different problem. They said, can you stop sending so many candidates to us? Because they were so busy trying to vet through, trying to make sure that all the things that we laid out before them, and then making sure that the subcommittee members are coming on board for what they are. I think on hindsight, perhaps we can do something better, but from a process standpoint, but I think it's also the need and the journey of the charity NPO per se. So we will have to just tune it accordingly to make sure that that is functioning as what is ascribed to do.
Thanks, Kevin. So I know it's not usual to end off a discussion session by asking, what's that one mistake that you want to avoid? But I thought that might be actually one way, because I trust that actually most of us who already have an NC in place are doing most of it right. Probably you just need a little bit of guidance, a little bit of fine tuning. Again, for those who don't have, CNPL has all the resources to actually help you get started. Don't lose heart. There actually are a lot more questions, but they are more or less fall into the categories that we have actually touched on. But there's this one other segment on evaluation. Should you get an independent person to come in to do the board evaluation and so on and so forth? Probably will not touch on this, because I do feel that if you go for the good program that Teresa has touched on, it actually may be shared with you. So I will want to take this opportunity to thank all our three panelists for sharing all your experience and expertise with the group over here. So this is a webinar, we can't see the rest of you, but I really want to thank all three of you for sharing so generously and giving of yourself. I would now like to hand the time back over to Kitson, who is the head of Center for Nonprofit Leadership. Kitson, please.
Thank you so much, Pei Lan, and a very good afternoon, fellow leaders. Well, I'm really, really heartened to see many of us taking time off this afternoon to join us in this forum. Well, we know that it's a school holidays, isn't it? And in fact, we know many of our other colleagues are already traveling, with their families during this period in time. Well, you are the gung ho ones that still stay on to equip ourselves with good knowledge to be even better board members. So what we learned this afternoon is really the nominating committee is not just a system that's put on paper, but it's really the backbone of our charities, and the importance of having a robust, solid, nominating com, so that we are able to bring out the best in terms of not only our boards, but also our charities. So once again, on behalf of the team at the Center for Nonprofit Leadership, I would really like to express my thanks and appreciation to Teresa, who is always there for us whenever we need her, who is always advocating for CNPL right from the beginning. Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you also so much to Kelvin and Wai Leong for sharing their valuable insights with us, how things go about at New Hope, as well as at AWA, for sharing these insights with us. And this is really, the gentleman's experience, and also for reinforcing the importance of a nominating committee. And of course, Pei Lan, you also always say yes to us as a leadership alumni member. Never fail to say no to us. Thank you so much, Pei Lan, for moderating this afternoon session. So before I close off, just like to invite all charities once again. CNPL, we are here for you. We do have our complimentary board advisory services that we provide. As what Teresa and the panel have also mentioned, we also have the board match program. We also have the board pulse in terms of the board evaluation. And the best part of it all is all free, because we are here for you. We are committed and we want to journey with you to drive board excellence and governance for your charities. So please connect with us. Feel free to drop us an email, look out for us, and we'll be happy to spend our time with you. All right. Just one announcement. The next forum is up and coming, and is the board's role in driving ESG improvements. So a lot has been talked about ESG, and we are bringing to you this webinar on the 12th of July. And EDM will be out shortly. So please remember to sign up for this session. It's actually hosted by EY. I believe it's EY Oceania in Australia, EY Singapore, as well as Community Foundation Singapore and Trinity Eco. All right, so we have the experts on ESG. So please sign up for this. All right, I do not want to hold you back too long. And I wish everyone a great evening and a happy weekend ahead. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, he said all the attendees removed already.
So all okay, okay,
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Peilan. Thank you,
okay.
Teresa.
Thanks, Phelan, and all the panel members. I enjoyed, yeah, and I learned as well.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you so much,
See you
everyone.
sometime. Okay,
Yes.
bye-bye.
Thank you
I
so
can go
much.
for holidays already.
Thanks, Jensen, for all the hard work.
No problem. Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody. Thanks,
everyone.
Peilan.
Bye.
Bye.